Moderna has announced plans to manufacture COVID-19 vaccines in Kenya. The pharmaceutical company holds much of the key intellectual property that relates to the mRNA vaccines, which are preferred in developed nations due to their better efficacy rates. They account for 92% of all vaccinations to date in the US and European Union. For more on this move, we're joined by the University of Technology's Management Professor Richard Wal-wyn. Professor Wal-wyn, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. So on the one hand, you have organizations like the People's Vaccine Alliance calling for a global shift in terms of the monopolization of vaccines and how they're still very much centralized in the West. And then you have Moderna making this announcement about setting up operations in Kenya. Is that an adequate response to the challenge over vaccine equity that we've had?
It certainly is a response, and I guess it's better than nothing. The interesting thing about this response is, first of all, that it's a lot of money. It's $500 million, which is a lot of money even for Moderna. I mean, Moderna is a company that had a revenue from the sales of COVID vaccines, I beg your pardon, of $18 billion in 2021 and made profits of $12 billion. But notwithstanding that the cash flow that the positive cash flow that the company has, it's still a lot of money. So it's a good thing, but the interesting thing about it is that Moderna has decided to pursue a strategy in which it keeps tight control over its intellectual property. So it's not licensing, it's not setting up a local subsidiary. It is Moderna in Kenya making a $500 million investment.
It flies in the face of efforts that we've seen from countries like South Africa and India that, of course, been at the forefront of trying to get the world to, as in, countries to fully sign off on a TRIPS waiver. Is this a signal, you think, from a pharmaceutical like Moderna that is something that they will not be endorsing?
I think TRIPS is very important in this whole discussion about Moderna and, for instance, and the messenger RNA technology transfer hub that was set up in Cape Town by the WHO. One of the conditions of TRIPS, so TRIPS allows countries to force compulsory licensing of technology. And one of the main conditions of that is that countries have to demonstrate that they have local manufacturing capability. And in the beginning of this messenger RNA vaccine manufacturing facility or initiative in Cape Town, Moderna was very negative about the capability of the organization, saying that it would never succeed in reproducing the technology or establishing the capability, and as a consequence wouldn't qualify for a compulsory license. So I think there's a lot of posturing between Moderna, the WHO, and BioNTech. As you know, BioNTech and Moderna hold the key intellectual property for the messenger RNA vaccine, particularly the COVID-19 vaccine. And they're going to do whatever they can to protect that intellectual property and prevent other countries from issuing a compulsory license or even reproducing the technology in any way.
Professor Wal-wyn, the issue there is that then the fight over vaccine equity, including the cost of vaccines and ensuring that pharmaceuticals are not literally just, smiling all the way to the bank while the world is in the middle of a global pandemic, those issues then seem to primarily not be on the radar when we look at how some of these responses are not going to address issues like the cost of vaccines, or even maybe to an extent it may improve vaccine access, but there's still nothing that suggests that we'll be paying less, particularly as low and middle income countries.
I think that's absolutely correct. This is all about profits and money. And particularly for the pharmaceutical companies that find themselves in the center position of this market. So Pfizer is another company that has recorded record profits in 2021. Its profits basically doubled in 2021 as a consequence of the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine. So the company Pfizer is going to do whatever it can, as I said, to protect these profits. It's a difficult call, really, because the issue about public health is that it crystallizes or brings into focus this issue about public benefit versus private gain, or public good versus private gain. And so there's this conflict, really, about to what extent should private companies profit from a public health intervention such as the COVID-19 vaccination, which was essential for public health. Without this vaccine, the impact of the pandemic would have been much worse than it presently has, and much worse going into the future. So, I mean, just to summarize a rather complicated discussion, there is this tension between public health or public good and private gain. And I think in this particular case that the two companies that are involved are benefiting disproportionately to their initial investment and the risk that they took. And secondly, they're actually purposefully undermining and eroding the efforts of WHO and other parties to establish a generic technology which is available at lower cost and so it's more accessible and more affordable.
All right. Professor Wal-wyn, let's leave it there for tonight. He's a Professor of Technology Management at the University of Pretoria.